seeking a motion to proceed. Motion to support staff recommendations and refuse variance 1 and support variance 2. Seconded. So, ma'am, you do understand that right now staff is refusing variance 1. They are supporting variance 2. So there are some conditions that are in place in the event, obviously, that variance 1 is not supported. Do you agree with the additional conditions as well in reference to the actual shed?
Sorry, what shed were you referring to?
Well, you have 2 variances that are being sought. Do you understand? That is being sought as 2 variances?
Okay.
Okay, so staff has made the recommendation that variance 1 is not being supported from staff's perspective, but variance 2 is.
Okay.
But there are some conditions associated with that, specifically drainage be obtained or maintained within your own property, and it's maintained within this, to the extent of the sketch, basically. So have you read those conditions, and do you agree to it? We have to make a decision based on that.
Yes.
Okay. So there is a motion to support staff by Mr. Nurse and seconded by Mr. Chadha. All in favor? That carries. Variance 1 has been refused and variance 2 has been supported.
Okay.
Okay, sorry. And you do have the ability to appeal, as has been stated at the beginning of the meeting as well.
Okay.
Okay?
Do I need to do anything formal after this, or that's...
No, but I would recommend that you get some clarity for your options, in particular from the building department for the interior space and anything that you do. I do recommend that you, and this is just you stay the course with the building permit. It would be something that may benefit you in the long run.
Okay.
But something for you to consider.
Okay, and will I get a copy of this?
Yes.
In the mail, yes?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay.
Perfect. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Calling application A18051, Malish and Amita Bimani. Property is located at 22 Morton Way.
Good morning, Mr. Chair and committee members, staffs. My name is Sanjeev Kumar from Centro Engineering Inc., representing Malish Bimani and Amita Bimani. Address is 22 Morton Way, application number A18051, ward number 4. I'm here to request for relief and permission for the variances listed. Maybe you have over there too. For the below grade entrance, which is interior side yard having a setback of existing 0.63 meters, which is 2.06 feet. And the second is to permit existing above grade entrance in the interior side yard with the steps having a setback of 0.76 meter, which is 2.50 feet. And the last one, to permit an existing driveway width of 7.3 meter to remain as is, because my client has a second unit permit recently got and change of use, so he needs at least 3 parking at the driveway.
Thank you. Committee members, are there any questions for the owner?
This is the permit he got recently for the second unit.
Yeah, it's already been obtained, or is it in the process? It's been
No, it is
obtained?
already obtained.
Okay. Excellent. Any questions by committee members? Seeing none? Is there anyone in the audience here to speak on this application? Seeing
This is
none?
right now, this is the existing condition for the driveway.
Sorry?
This is the existing condition for the driveway. That's the width 7.3.
Mm-hmm.
He wants to maintain as is because he needs a 3 car parking as required by zoning by law now for the second unit.
I'm trying to look. I have some photographs that I had on the site visit. Is it got concrete currently on both sides right now?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Okay, staff, would you like to weigh in with your comments, please?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Staff would like to support this application in part. subject to 6 conditions. Condition number 1, that the variance number 4 be refused. Condition number 2, that a building permit shall be obtained within 60 days of the decision of the approval for the below-grade entrance to the house and the exterior below-grade entrance stairs. Condition number 2, that the driveway width be reduced to the maximum permitted width of 6.71 meters and the permeable landscape space restored within 90 days of the decision of approval or as extended at the discretion of the Director of Development Services upon receipt of a written request for extension from the owner. Condition number 4, that drainage on adjacent properties shall not be adversely affected. Condition number 5, that the extent of the variances be limited to that shown on the sketch attached to the public notice. And condition number 6, that failure to comply with and maintain the conditions of the committee shall render the approval null and void. Thank you.
Thank you. Committee members, any questions to staff? Seeing none? Sir, so you do understand that staff's recommendation is not supporting variance 4, and they've 6 additional or 6 conditions associated with that.
Yeah, I understand those conditions, sir. So obviously, once says permitted, then we go for the permit, building permit.
Okay.
But my concern is driveway, because how we can park 3 cars over there. And there's another problem with this, see, there's an all-in way just in front of his driveway. So it's very difficult and not feasible to back up car and everything frequently. So that's the reason to maintain 7.3 as we are requesting for.
Garage space, is that usable space for you currently?
Pardon me?
Your garage space?
Yeah. Already there is 7.3 as a driveway width.
No, understood, but the home is designed for 2 parking spaces in the front, and
But he got recently that second unit, so additional parking will require, right?
understood.
Yeah.
Thus, the garage space, is that something that is usable for you currently?
Yeah, it's usable, but that's the problem because it's all in way just in front. So backing the car is in the garage.
Understood.
These are the feasible condition, not.
It is an inconvenience, however, it is
Yeah.
something that is feasible
Yeah.
or is doable,
Yeah.
correct? Okay. Committee members, any questions or comments? If not, seeking a motion to proceed.
Through you, Mr. Chair, just a clarification. In order for you to obtain is part of the condition for your basement apartment to have additional parking? Is that what you're requesting?
No, we applied for, and first we went for the zoning compliance, and we submitted a site plan, upgraded site plan to them, and they okay, and then we applied for the second unit permit. So there were no question raised on that time regarding the width of the driveway.
There's no requirement for additional parking?
Yeah, we required for additional parking.
You physically feel that you require it, but for the application, the permit that you received is not required?
It's required.
It is required?
Yeah, 3 parkings needed. Once is like a 2 for upstairs and 1 for the second unit.
Ms. Corazzola or staff, can we get some clarity on that?
Certainly, Mr. Chair, through you. The drawings that were submitted for the 2-unit dwelling indicate a driveway width of 5.2 meters wide, which is the width of the actual garage. That will accommodate 2 cars side by side, with 1 additional parking space required, then the third, because 3 are required in total for a 2-unit dwelling, is to be accommodated within the interior of the garage. Tandem spaces are anticipated, and certainly a certain amount of reconfiguring or juggling of vehicles is the norm in most households. The bylaw does not require 3 parking spaces across the width of the property, all with street access. Tandem spaces are permitted, and that's what was approved by zoning staff, not a 7.32 meter wide driveway.
Thank you. From my perspective, sir, I do applaud you for going through the process of actually obtaining the permit. However, from Streetscape, we do deal with this quite often. 3 cars on the front of the building is something that I don't think meets the Streetscape. Having the ability to park in your garage does allow you to have that inconvenience to certain times, but does allow you to do it. So from my perspective, I can I would support staff in this situation. That being said, I need to obtain from you an actual understanding that you do agree to those conditions in the event that we do support staff, and that you do understand that you understand the conditions and agree to them as they are written.
Okay.
So we'll ask the question through the committee, but I need to obtain from you, do you understand and agree to the conditions as stated?
Okay.
Okay. Committee members, any other questions? If not, seeking a motion to proceed.
Motion to proceed in accordance with staff recommendations.
Okay. Mr. Chadha, did you have a question? Or
Yeah, just a quick question through you, Mr. Chair, to the staff. In the event if the homeowner installs something permanent on the side of the driveway, I'm sure if he's not aware, maybe they can work with the staff. So in that way, maybe they can just get away as long as that space is not being used for the parking.
Through you, Mr. Chair, yes, that is correct in response to that question. The only variance required here is for the overall width of the driveway. They have not removed any of the required permeable surface. So although the condition suggests that they have to reinstate the permeable landscaping, the required permeable landscaping hasn't been removed. So installation of permanent barriers along one of the two sides to make the reduction of 2 feet. It's only about 2 feet too wide. 6.71 meters is permitted, which is a 22-foot wide driveway, which is a comfortable 2-car wide driveway with walking paths on either side. That would be the requirement. So there are options available to achieve compliance with the bylaw.
that is something for you to consider, sir, that you may not have to actually physically remove, you may have to just make modifications. However, we are still, in this case, a motion's been put forward to support staff's recommendations of non-approval of variance 4. Do we have a seconder? Seconded by Ms. Stoffler. All in favor? That carries. Staff recommendations are approved with variance 4 being refused.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Pardon me, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to make note for the record that I'm the authorized agent for 75 Stafford, 8049. I believe I may have missed it in my tardiness. Just want to know that I'm here.
We had...
To the bottom.
That's what I figured. Sorry I was
Yeah.
late. Just want to let you know that I'm here. Thank you.
Thank you.
Calling application A18053, Sarpinder, Barinder, and Dalvinder Singh, Mandicola, property located at 338 Cranberry Crescent.
Good morning, sir.
Good morning. Good morning.
Just if we can get your name and address for the record, sir.
My name is Sukhwinder Singh. Our address is 38 Cranberry Crescent, Brampton.
Sorry, sir, and you were one of the owners?
38 Cranberry.
You were one of the owners, sir?
Yes.
Okay, so we have the application before us. Would you like to add anything or any explanation to the...
Actually, I have the side entrance in 94. When they make just a house, I asked to builder to make entrance, and I talked to my neighbor. He agreed because we have the U-shaped entrance from the inside. Can't take anything in the basement. So they said they do for us. We just pay him. We don't know what he did. That's all I can say.
Okay. We'll proceed, and if there's any questions, we'll come back to you as well, sir. Okay? Are there any questions or comments from committee to the owner? Seeing none, is there anyone in the audience here to speak on this application? Seeing none, staff, would you like to weigh in with your comments, please?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Staff would like to recommend the approval of this application in part, subject to 8 conditions. Condition number 1, that the variances 3 and 4 be refused. Condition number 2, that a building permit shall be obtained within 60 days of the decision of the approval for the below-grade entrance to the house and the exterior below-grade entrance stairs. Condition number 3, that the below-grade entrance shall not be used for an unregistered second dwelling unit. Condition number 4, that the driveway width be reduced to the maximum permitted width of 6.71 meters and the permeable open space restored on both sides of the driveway within 90 days of the decision of approval, or as extended at the discretion of the Director of Development Services upon receipt of a written request for extension from the owner. Condition number 5, that structural separators such as curbing or bollards should be installed to separate the driveway from the walkway. Condition number 6, that drainage on adjacent properties shall not be adversely affected. Condition number 7, that the extent of the variances be limited to that shown on the sketch attached to the public notice. And condition number 8, that failure to comply with and maintain the conditions of the committee shall render the approval null and void. Thank you.
Thank you. So, sir, do you understand the conditions as they've been submitted from staff? They are not, they are recommending refusal of variances 3 and 4. They are supporting 1 and 2 with those additional conditions. Do you agree to those conditions and understand them?
Yes.
Yes? Okay, committee members, any questions or comments?
Same for you, Mr. Chair, if gentleman understands by installing some permanent barriers to some side of the driveway, and they might not need to reduce the driveway width. Maybe the applicant can talk to the staff after the meeting and understand how this thing can work.
Okay, do you understand that, sir? There may be certain things that can be done that you don't have to physically remove portions of the driveway, but you may have to install. Is that, Ms. Corazon?
I'm sorry, through you, Mr. Chair. No, that's not the case in this
Okay.
situation. In this case, they have paved right directly to the property line, so that portion of the required 2 feet between the property line and the edge of the concrete surface will need to be reinstated.
Are we referring to the permeable strip aspect?
To the permeable strip, yes.
Okay.
So they will need a soft surface along the side lot line. I'm also concerned with the enforceability of the conditions that have been recommended.
Are you referring to condition 5?
Yes, in as much as they've asked that the driveway be reduced to the 6.71, which is the permitted, but then also, as a further reduction, they're looking for physical barriers that would reduce the parking surface to restrict it on the walkways as well, and that's not how the bylaw is typically written.
If it is reduced, the need for the barriers is not
Absolutely.
required.
That's correct. Yeah,
Okay.
all they need to do is reduce it to the 6.71 meters maximum, and that includes the walkways that are beside it.
I tend to agree, and if there's any clarity from staff, the removal of that condition, because, as we've understood in the past, is that if we reduce the permeable strip, they have the option of doing that on the other side, but this way we're actually making it a requirement and a condition.
That's correct. And I mean, bollards in a residential area are really not the kind of landscape feature that we would hope to see.
Okay. Any comments, whomever had supplied that condition?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We agree to the removal of the condition number 5.
Okay. So again, for clarity, sir, there are options that you can do on one side of the driveway of potentially not removing that aspect. You could put something there, planters, things like. You would just need some clarity from staff. But one portion of the driveway, as is stated, and staff's recommendations will have to be removed at this point in time. Okay? So do you understand and agree to those conditions, sir?
Yes.
Okay? So for clarity, we have removed condition 5, making 7 conditions in total. Is that clear? Or staff, is that? Committee members, any questions or concerns?
No, Chair, I'm fine as long as the homeowner does understand that we moved, or the staff recommend one removal of condition number 5, and there are total 7 conditions moving forward.
Okay. So Mr. Crouchy had put the motion forward. Would you like to just modify the motion with that? Oh, did you put, or was that on the last one? I apologize.
That was the last one.
You're prepared?
Motion to approve. and then accept it.
Thank you. I was jumping ahead of ourselves. Is there a second there?
I'll second that.
Mr. Chadha, all in favor? That carries. That is approved. So conditions 3 and 4 have been refused. Conditions 1 and 2 have been approved. Okay, sir, with those conditions. Thank you.
Eleanor Tanis and Ingrid Deschamps Tanis. The property is located at 105 Manitou Crescent.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, committee members. My name is Eli Tanis. I'm the owner of 105 Manitou Crescent. We are seeking from the committee an easement of 39.4 for outside for a washroom onto the back of the property. As we can see right here now on the plan, we have a deck that to be removed, and we bought this property as an investment property, and right now we only have one washroom upstairs in the house, and to accommodate a family of 4 or 5, it's very real difficult and challenging for a family. So I check, as a guy who works in construction, I check everywhere in this house really to put in a washroom, and I couldn't come up with no idea how to do it. So my only option was to apply for a permit to put on at least 6 feet outside in the back, so we could accommodate a family of 4 or 5 in this house.
Thank you. Any additional information?
Well, I don't know.
We have everything in front of us, but if there's anything else you'd like to add, or as
No,
we proceed.
not really.
Okay.
Thank you.
Any questions or comments by committee members to the owner? Seeing none, is there anyone in the audience here to speak on this application? Seeing none, staff, would you like to weigh in with your comments, please?
Staff are in support of this application A18-054, subject to the following conditions. Number 1, that the extent of the variances be limited to that shown on the sketch attached to the public notice. Number 2, that the elevations be satisfactory to the Commissioner of Planning and Development Services prior to the building permit being issued. And number 3, that failure to comply with and maintain the conditions of the committee shall render the approval null and void.
Thank you. So, sir, do you understand the conditions being forwarded by staff?
Yes, sir.
Okay, and agree to them?
Yes, please.
Okay. Yes, sir?
Mr. Dykstra, the conditions suggest that the extent of variance would be limited to that shown on the sketch, but the sketch doesn't show an addition to the bathroom. Should we be defining that to where the deck's been removed from? Through the chair, the configuration of the addition is not actually the same as the deck to be removed. We received additional drawings which identified the extent of the proposed addition.
We have not obtained them. Does anyone, committee have that?
We have a sketch?
I'm receiving suggested wording from the zoning bylaw that the extent of the variance be limited to that shown on the sketch attached to this decision as a schedule. Staff have seen the addition, and it is similar to the deck to be removed, although it does go to the extents of the sides of the building, and it follows the general outline of the building, and but does not go as far as the extent of the deck to be removed.
Okay, so just basically rewording that includes a schedule be attached to the notification, correct?
That's correct. Now, I haven't seen the schedule either, through you, Mr. Chair. Ideally, it will also comply with the zoning bylaw for setbacks, but at this point in time, we're dealing with a coverage variance. And the coverage is what's indicated on
Yeah.
the notice.
I do thank Mr. Crouch for bringing that up to our attention. We don't want to approve something that may not be able to be, or have to come back for some reason. So if it stays within the lines of that deck to be removed, would that meet the zoning setbacks?
He's going right across the back of the elevation.
I understand, so I'm just asking it to Ms. Corzola that,
It's not in that area. The deck to be removed doesn't cover the whole width of the rear of the house. That's the proposal I just heard.
and you're proposing the entire length, okay? Sorry, Mr. Chatham?
Same, I do agree with Mr. Crouch. I don't think so. The washroom, the proposed washroom is going to be by 10 by 20 at the back, as the deck is 20 by 10.
You're correct. It isn't the same configuration.
Can we-
and- Pardon?
Sorry, my apologies, go on.
Do you have that sketch?
The deck is 10 feet wide by 20 feet long. My proposal is 6 feet to the width of the house.
6 feet projecting out, but the entire width of the house.
Yes, please.
Would wording just,
Through Mr. Chair, so compared to the adjoining lot on Park 5, so that's as you're in front of the house to the right,
Yes, please.
will you be deeper than the back of that elevation?
Not exactly so.
It extends beyond your house.
Yeah,
Obviously,
it-
the other
it-
half of the same is the same depth.
Yeah, it extend beyond my house, but it won't be that deeper than the one on the right.
Thank you.
Ms. Corzola, just as a question to the staff, oftentimes we just use the wording of generally in respect to the sketch. Would that satisfy zoning provisions, or
It would. I would still like to see the sketch
as would
that's
be?
being referenced by planning staff attached to the decision, because that will show the addition of extending the full width of the house. If it is only 6 feet deep into the rear yard, then that appears to comply with the zoning bylaw requirement for building setbacks. The problem with comparing it to the deck is that the deck is allowed to encroach into a rear yard setback, whereas the building addition wouldn't be. 7.6 meters is the required rear yard setback. So perhaps the condition can be modified to read that the extent of the variance shall be as generally shown on the sketch attached to this decision as Schedule A and in compliance with the setback requirements of the zoning bylaw.
Okay. So, sir, we're just, yep.
Shouldn't we have some concern about circulation with the neighbors if they don't know what's happening?
The only issue being coverage, and that being the only variance. The deck being shown as the general location and the notice indicating that it is for the purpose of a building addition. I don't see there's an issue with the notice.
So, sir, just for clarity, what we're trying to do is make sure that you conform to the bylaw even when we approve this, so that you don't have to come back for any discrepancy. So you are certain that it will be within roughly 6 to 20 feet? You're
Yep.
not going to be projecting more? Because in the event you project more, you may be creating a additional variance.
Yes, I understand that, and it would be just as the plan show and just as we propose.
Okay, Mr. Chatham?
Just one question to you, Mr. Chair. Do we have that proposed sketch somewhere?
That's what we were looking for, Mr. Chatham. I don't believe we have it here present.
But I'm not sure if, through you, Mr. Chair, if I'm suggesting something right. Please do correct me if I'm wrong. Maybe we can push this to the end of the agenda and we can obtain somehow that one for the sake of clarity.
Mr. Peter?
Would we be able to?
My wife is trying to see if she can get it on her phone.
Because I do agree with the Chair, I do agree with you and Mr. Crouch, but at the same time, let's say if there's something off by a foot, and then the gentleman has to come back, and then there's a whole issue about the fee and everything, and the pilot.
No, it'd be more prudent. Ms. Corzolo, how close are we? You had said that the rear setback would typically be what, 7 point something meters? Is that?
7.6 meters. And if the addition is in fact 6 feet deep, that will be 7.6 meters.
Okay.
So they are very close.
Very close.
Through the chair, this variance came through to planning staff via a building permit of some sort. So it would have been identified through zoning staff as to what the zoning bylaw requirements needed in order to obtain approval for this. So through their review, they noted that the only requirements, the bylaw requirements required for the building permit would have been a lot coverage. Through their permit, they would have identified whether it required a rear yard setback or any other requirements to adhere to the zoning bylaw.
If I may clarify that point through you, Mr. Chair, there is no building permit application. There was an inquiry for the construction of addition, but because it didn't comply with the zoning bylaw, in terms of coverage, it was not accepted. So I do not have any drawings with me, and nor can I confirm that the drawings that planning staff have reviewed and are generally in agreement with is in fact the drawing that was submitted or discussed over the counter a couple of months ago.
So if we amended, excuse me, Mr. Carefree, if we amended the condition to say a rear addition 6 feet by 20 feet, and you're content that that would allow 7.6 meters, wouldn't that be the appropriate thing to do?
It would be my preference that you simply require that it comply with the setback requirements of the bylaw. I believe that 6 feet is deep enough, but I'm not going off of a survey here. This is just the site plan. So complying with the setbacks.
So I'll ask the applicant.
Yes, please.
What we're looking to do is just clarify the wording.
Yes, please.
If and when we approve that, you would then have to submit for your building permit, but meet those setback conditions implicitly. If that is not met, you would need another variance. So you would have to understand and agree to that.
Yes, please. I agree to that.
Okay, so I guess a modification to the wording that highlights the 6 by 20 foot addition.
Through you, Mr. Chair, again, my preference would be simply compliance with the
Compliance
setback
with the-
requirements of the bylaw.
Through you, Mr. Chair, if I can just,
Get some clarity.
well, I want to advise that I've not received this drawing either, and if we're attaching it as Schedule A, like when is it going to be provided to me?
I can get that drawing to you in the next half an hour or so, if you will allow me to. I had the sketch at home. We sent it to the city, and
I understood, yeah. With this, from staff's perspective, if we highlight and say that it is required to meet the setbacks as required, is the addition of the sketch really something that we need from your perspective as an attachment?
As an attachment, no. I would then perhaps describe the addition being a rear yard addition. Other than the description and the sketch that was attached with a deck that's shown to be removed, it's difficult to relate it to something. So perhaps there is no need simply to attach a schedule of any kind. You have a maximum lot coverage. It's for the purpose of accommodating a rear yard addition. That addition shall comply with the setback requirements of the bylaw, and leave it at that.
From my perspective, that would meet what we're trying to accomplish. I just want some clarity that staff would be satisfied with that.
Yes.
And committee then would be satisfied with that as well. So any comments from the committee? Ms. Hoffman?
Mr. Chair, just wanted to confirm that then no side yard setbacks are required.
Yeah, the side yard setbacks, if they're matching the building envelope that's currently shown there, are likely to comply. We would need to verify that, obviously, through a survey and a review of the permit drawings. But with a condition imposed of that nature, that would be the requirement. Alternatively, another variance would be required.
essentially they would be building within those restrictions or come for another variance, as we had indicated. Okay, so seeking some clarity from committee how we would like to proceed.
Just one
Yep,
comment.
Mr. Chado?
To the applicant quickly. Through you, Mr. Chair, to the homeowner, as you know, sir, the
Yeah.
deck is going to be removed,
Yes, please.
and if you are going to build any further deck after the new proposed, so you know you have to come back,
Yes, yes.
and I'm sure staff has looked at the grading and stuff, that access from the backyard from the house,
There's a
if there's no deck.
there's a walkway through the garage on the left side of the house because they're drawing by the garage. So there's a clay walkway on the left side of the house to the backyard. And the right side is shared between me and the neighbor. There's a fence right there now. He have his side, I have my side. So there's access right around the house.
Okay.
So it's fine, but through you, Mr. Chair, all I'm looking for just a proper wording in terms of recommendation. So I just feel comfortable of supporting something.
That satisfies that. So are we all on the same page with that?
The setbacks are going to determine the
That's
size of
right.
the addition.
Correct. So is that would
Pretty
be,
straightforward.
yeah. So staff, just for, I guess, Ms. Meyer's benefit, what type of wording would we want to insert there so that we are all on the same page?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I think it's simplest that condition 1 be modified to say that the variance for a rear yard addition is approved, subject to compliance with the setback requirements of the zoning bylaw.
Okay, sir, so you understand and agree to those conditions?
Yes, please.
Okay. Committee members, any questions? If not, seeking a motion to proceed.
Motion to approve with amended.
Mr. Nurse?
Define the setback requirement for the applicant, it's always seems pretty vague. I mean, compliant with the setback requirements, from 2 feet to 5 feet.
Well, I think we've highlighted that it is the 7.6 meters.
The setbacks for all lot lines are specified in the zoning bylaw. They're very prescriptive. The rear yard setback in this instance is 7.6 meters. The side yard setback to a one-story addition would be 1.2 meters.
Okay. And as Mr. Crouch had indicated, I'm comfortable, is that then he would have to then proceed with the building permit that meets those setback requirements. If any deviation from those setback requirements, an additional variance would be sought.
And through you, Mr. Chair, I do want to confirm through you to the applicant whether this is in fact a simple one-story addition.
Very good point.
Yes, please.
So,
Thank you. Then perhaps the variance to permit the lot coverage for a one-story rear yard addition approved subject to compliance with the setback requirements of the bylaw.
okay. Mr. Nurse, is that okay? So, Mr. Crouch, you were proceeding with a motion?
Motion to approve with the amended conditions.
Thank you. Seconder? Seconded by Mr. Nurse. All in favor? That carries. That is approved, sir.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. And again, I do applaud you going through the right channels, and just be clear on when you do obtain the permit that those are strict requirements.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
On application A18055, 2514682 Ontario Inc., the property is located at auction lane.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, city staff. My name is Mark Denardis. I'm a planning associate from GWD Planners. We have filed a minor variance application on behalf of the owner of the property located at the southwest corner of Goreway Drive and Queen Street East, situated just west of the intersection. The registered owner is numbered company 2514682 Ontario Inc. This is actually our third trip to Committee of Adjustment in the last 3 years. Our office has previously filed minor variance applications for the abutting lands to the west, located on these two parcels here. The one at the northwest in 2016 and the one at the southwest just last June. So we filed a minor variance application last month for a total of 6 variances, and in summary, they are for parking, setbacks, height, and lot coverage. We feel that the variances satisfy the 4 tests, and we filed a related site plan application just prior to the holidays, and we're in the process of advancing that application. We expect that we'll be filing a resubmission in the coming month or so. So we're just in a coordination exercise, but we needed to come to committee to seek some relief from the zoning bylaw. Before we do so, we have reviewed the staff report and conditions of approval and find them acceptable. I have one request, and that is to amend condition 1, which sought a parking variance of 415 spaces, whereas the bylaw requires 631. In the last week to 10 days, I've been working with city staff and fine-tuning the site plan application, and we've lost about 3 spaces, so now we're down to 416, whereas we had initially provided 419. I just want to amend the variance to state 410. I just want some added flexibility should something else come up through the site plan process. If it's approved as it was submitted, that would leave me with 1 space, and I could be back here in 2-3 months should something pop up. So I would like to amend the variance to state to permit 410 spaces. Again, our intent is still to provide as many spaces as possible. The latest and greatest plan provides a total of 416. And happy to answer any questions that committee may have. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll get some clarity, I believe, when we get to the staff portion. Any questions by committee members to the agent? Is there anyone in the audience here to speak on this application? Seeing none, staff, would you like to weigh in with your comments, please?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The staff is supportive of this application, subject to 3 conditions. Condition number 1, that the extent of the variances be limited to that shown on the sketch attached to the public notice. Condition number 2, that the owner finalize site plan approval under city file SP 17-123, execute a site plan agreement, and post any required financial securities and insurance to the satisfaction of the Director of Development Services, and that failure to comply with and maintain the conditions of the committee shall render the approval null and void. Thank you.
Thank you. So for clarity, staff, the agent has requested a 410. Is that something that staff, from your perspective, would be supportable? I mean, from my perspective, it's minimal, but just want to kind of get some clarity from staff's perspective.
That would be an opinion that I would request planning staff provide. I have no issue.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Planning staff have no issue with that minor change to the from 415 to 410.
Okay. I do also would make a request, and again for the indulgence of staff, is in condition 1 it reads that the extent of the variances be limited to that shown on the sketch. I do tend to like the wording generally, in particular when we're working with an application of this size, so that we're not limited to coming back for something very minor. Is that something that staff would be able to agree to as well? And also the agent as well, is that something that you would agree to as well? Staff?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We do agree to that.
Okay. Any comments, Mr. Denars?
Through Mr. Chairman, so could I have the condition read out loud?
I've just asked that the word generally be included in condition 1, just so that we're not limited to that sketch as attached. So.
Through
these
Mr.
are-
Chair, that's fine. That's
Okay.
acceptable, yes.
So committee members, any questions or concerns with the,
Through you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Mahmoud, we're doubling the permitted height of the building along Queen Street, and the text of your opinion says, well, you know, we want to be compatible with other buildings, but now, well, this would be a nice feature on Queen Street. Is that not the object of a rezoning? Why would the Committee of Adjustment consider that minor?
Yeah, through the chair, this part of the Queen Street East is an intensification corridor where the long-term intent of the official plan is to have intensified development within buildings which have a height from 2 to 10 stories. So this is the long-term intent. So in view of that, staff is of the view that allowing a building height which is 6-story should not be a concern. It should actually be in conformity with the official plan, long-term intent. Thank you.
Through Mr. Chair, I apologize. At the beginning of my presentation, I should have advised that the proposal is for a proposed motel and convention center, and I know this submission included a number of renderings that were prepared by the project architect. It's worth noting that there's probably about 4 or 5 other hotels, motels in the general vicinity of the site within maybe a 10-minute drive, and they're all about 5 to 6 stories tall. They range from Hilton, Hampton, I think this is Monte Carlo. This proposal is for the Hyatt, and so they're proposing a maximum of 6 stories for the motel and a 7-story parking structure, 3 stories which are below grade, 4 stories that are above grade. So it's just something to keep in mind.
okay.
What about this Queen Street on that sketch? Is that the road that's going to the middle of it?
No, so if you're looking at the top rendering, it would be to the left. Let's see if we got a...
On the lower rendering, it would be in front of that, correct?
Right. So this is Queen Street.
Okay.
And auction lanes in the back.
Okay. Any other questions or comments by committee members?
Well, just a comment, Chair. I do understand Mr. Crouch's concern. In the same area, on the same intersection, just north of Gorway and Queen, there is some residential high-rise development already in exist, and they have, I think, higher than this building. So, but I do agree with Mr. Crouch's concern.
Yeah. Okay. And through you, Mr. Chair, there is the natural gas plant, which is located just to the south of this site, which towers over this proposal. You can see it for several kilometers away. So,
No, I tend to think it, from my perspective and from staff's comments, fits into the intensification corridor on Queen Street, and something that the quality of it seems to be of the highest standard, so it does seem to work well. Okay, if there are no other comments or questions, seeking a motion to proceed. Okay, so again, just so we are clear, Mr. DeNardis, staff, you had asked for the request of the parking to read 410 as opposed to 415, and then I had asked for the change in the conditions to read generally. So those are, you understand and agree to those conditions?
through you, Mr. Chair, yes, I do.
Okay. Mr. Nurse, you had put the motion forward to proceed with the amended conditions, seconded by Mr. Chadha. All in favor? That carries. That is approved, sir.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Calling application A18056, 2256798 Ontario Court. The property is located at 945 Peter Robertson Boulevard.
Good morning. My name is Gurjinder Janda. I represent the landlord for 945 Peter Robertson. So at unit number 1, we have a potential tenant who wants to bring in a sit-in restaurant. And for that, there is a minimum parking requirement of 70 parking spaces, whereas we only have 58. And we're looking to seek permission to proceed with this sit-in restaurant.
Thank you. Just one question I have, just for clarity. The applicant is the owner of the plaza?
Yes,
not
sir.
the owner of the restaurant? Or
Yes.
are they one
No,
and the same?
it's the owner of the plaza.
Okay. Any questions by committee members to the agent? Is there anyone in the audience here to speak on this application? Seeing none? Staff, would you like to weigh in with your comments, please?
Staff are in support of this application, A18-056, with the following conditions. Number 1, that the requirement for parking for any combination of uses permitted at the applicable parking rate shall be in accordance with the zoning bylaw and shall not exceed 70 parking spaces. Number 2, that the restaurant use in Unit 1 be limited to a maximum area of 152 meters, which is 1,637 feet squared. And 3, that failure to comply with and maintain the conditions of the committee shall render the approval null and void.
Thank you. Sir, have you had an opportunity to review those conditions?
Yes, sir.
And they are agreeable to you?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Any questions by committee members to staff? Seeing none, seeking a motion to proceed. Motion to approve with conditions by Mr. Crouch, seconded by Ms. Stoffler. All in favor? That carries. That is approved, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Calling application A18058, Holland Christian Homes, Inc. The property is located at 7900 McLaughlin Road.
Just trying to figure out where the microphone is. This one? This one? This one? This one? Oh, thank you very much. Good morning, Mr. Chairman, ladies and gentlemen of the committee and city staff. Thank you for reviewing our application this morning. My name is Michael Scott Schumacher. I'm a partner of OCA Architects, and I will be the owner's agent discussing this matter this morning. We are applying for a reduction to the landscape open space from 41.98% to 40%, and also to permit a combined total of 280 nursing home beds within buildings 5 and 7. A little bit of history on the project. We did go through committee of adjustment probably about a year and a half ago, where we cleaned up the entire site. It is quite a large complex, and we went from 120 beds to 128. I'll just show a quick drawing of what we're talking about. The color is not coming out so much. I'll do it this way. All right, so when we're talking about building 7, that's this building right here, which is the proposed long-term care building. And when we're talking about building 5, this is currently a 4-story building with 128 beds, which is for the previous committee of adjustment. We are asking to raise this to 5 stories and increase this to 160 beds, which is part of the the number of beds that we're adding. The reason for this new building has to do a lot with this older building here, building 5, which is an existing long-term care building of 120 beds. And we're basically moving these residents into this new building as part of the Ministry of Health's long-term care B&C bed renewal. The reason why we did not have 160 beds is 2.5 years ago we were told that the ministry was not going to provide any new licenses. Now with the new government and some changes, there's 5,000 new licenses being sent out, and that's in the round 1. So we have a need in the community for new long-term care beds. I think everyone is aware of our, our crisis of our aging baby boomers. So this is the primary reason for this. We do meet the zoning for the height, and planning is in support of it on the condition that we cap it at 5 stories. A little bit of history on the reduction to the landscape. Over on this side, Bell had installed a fiber optics box serving this community over here, which ended up being right in the middle of the driveway. To move the box was $500,000 and was going to affect this community. So we revised the driveway and a few comments from Waste Management about the turning radius, and that's why we've asked for the reduction of landscape. In general, I guess, discussion with planning, zoning had made a suggestion, since we are getting new beds and new licenses are being applied for, to increase the number of nursing home to, I believe we asked for a total of 280. That was actually suggested by zoning and then later recanted by planning. The thinking of that additional beds would be, while the other long-term care beds are under construction, they're going to need swing space where they move the residents. Not all spaces have greenfield. They have to work within their existing confines of their building. So we would like to create the flexibility in the planning of this to allow for other nursing homes to move their residents into this section. We don't have those licenses yet. We might not get them, but we asked for the proposal for future flexibility. One of the conditions that we would have with that would be that we would fall within the existing zoning bylaws. So we would meet the parking, we would meet the height, we would meet all the setbacks. We're unsure why planning has rejected it. And I think that's basically our argument, is that it would benefit the community. There's a need for it. We would put assisted living if we cannot do long-term care beds. We're basically going to have the same occupancy. And that's all I would like to add to the application.
One question, I don't know if it's within your scope, but by approving the additional beds, are we impeding potentially other areas of obtaining beds?
No, you're not. You're not, because it has to go through a process through the LIN, and the LIN decides where the beds go. So we don't have the licenses. All you would be saying is that it is permitted. There's a whole process we still have to go through. So
Right.
through the LIN, through the ministry, and then even if this was approved, we still have to go through site plan approval, which would include everything that site plan approval does. So checking, your services, your shadow lines, all of the zoning. So basically, you'd be approving 220 beds of licenses that we don't have yet.
Right.
It will take a number of years to get.
And I tend to kind of understand the philosophy. I just wanted to be clear that we're not impeding on any other areas.
No,
that,
you will not be impeding, because that is a separate process that is decided
and I
by
thought
the-
so, but
Yeah.
just for clarity.
Yeah.
Okay. Any other questions by committee members to the agent? Seeing none, is there anyone in the audience here to speak on this application? Seeing none, staff, would you like to go in with your comments, please?
Staff are in support of this application, subject to the following conditions. Number one, that the extent of the variances be noted here, generally limited to that shown on the sketch attached to the public notice. Number two, that building 7 be limited in height to 5 stories. Number three, that a combined total of a maximum of 160 nursing home beds be permitted within building 5 and 7, whereas the bylaw permits a maximum of 120 nursing home beds. Number four, that the owner finalize site plan approval under site plan SP 16-015.000 or file and obtain approval for a new site plan application. Execute a site plan agreement and post any required financial securities and insurance to the satisfaction of the Director of Development Services within 120 days of the decision of the committee, or to be extended at the discretion of the Director of Development Services upon receipt of a written request for extension from the owner. Number five, that the permissions granted as part of this minor variance not be established until such time as a site plan has been approved and all related on-site improvements are implemented to the satisfaction of the Director of the Development Services. And six, that failure to comply with and maintain the conditions of the committee shall render the approval null and void.
Thank you. So for clarity, in reading the conditions, staff's planning recommendations is for 160 as opposed to the 280 that were sought?
That's correct. What isn't noted, it should be noted that the applicant is filed has an outstanding site plan file SB 16-015.000, which they have either the potential to continue along either revising that site plan application or completing that site application and then submitting a new site plan application that would include the additional story that is not on the current site plan application and revise the landscaping requirement and the parking configuration at the lower right-hand corner. Staff are in support of 160 nursing home beds because that is how many beds that could be accommodated with the additional story to the proposed nursing home building number 7. So that would essentially take it from the 4 stories, which would include the 128 beds, to 5 stories at 160 beds. Staff haven't looked at what the repercussions of it would be to go to the full extent of going up to the 280 nursing home beds. There may be additional traffic or other repercussions that we haven't reviewed yet, and we haven't had time to review that. And staff believe that going through the following site plan application, that if they can demonstrate through that process that the 280 additional beds can be accommodated, then we'll see at that point what can go forward. That's planning staff's perspective. From a zoning perspective, or from accommodating other additional nursing home beds in the future, we leave that up to you to decide.
So I guess through your explanation is that because the site plan is still open, that allows for additional beds from planning's perspective? I'm trying to understand, would they then need another variance if they proceed with that site plan application?
The site plans don't necessitate the beds, so there's no correlation between the site plan and the number of beds. The number of beds is based off of the permissions in the zoning bylaw and how many of the beds the applicant can obtain through the other Ontario processes. So the site plan does not necessarily impede the number of nursing home beds, but through staff had some concerns with allowing for the full extent of the 280 nursing home beds because we did not know if there might be some sort of future impacts on the site due to the allowances of the increase, dramatic increase.
Okay.
Hence the allowable of the 160 nursing home beds, which can be accommodated in the additional story.
Okay.
Yeah. Mr. Chairman, if I could just make one clarification on that.
Please.
This building 7, is designed right now for 100, just so we can talk about how we get to 280. This is currently accommodating 128. We're asking for 32 additional, which is additional floor. So this building will be 160. This building currently, as built at 2 stories, is currently accommodating 120 long-term care beds. We have the parking, we have the servicing, all designed for this building, which is already accommodating 120 beds. This new building has its own parking underground that accommodates just this building. So what we are asking for is within the zoning bylaw, which basically caps us at 2 stories, we might be able to put a small little addition on the back to allow the 160 beds. It's just very specific in this location. So we're not talking about that we can add more stories here, surprise. We'll build a new building over here, surprise. It's in this spot. It is currently in this spot. It's not moving from that spot. So we're not affecting traffic.
Okay. So all the conditions that have been sought, from your perspective, sir, would be agreeable to, with the exception of condition 3, and your request would be that it read 280?
That's correct, yeah. And very specifically, to planning's point, that it is very specific, 160 for this area, which is building 7, and the other 120 in the existing building 5, which is currently where they are. I think that will meet the intent of the zoning bylaw, the official plan, the character of the area, and there is a need and demand, most importantly, condition 4, for this service.
Okay. Any comments or questions by committee members? Ms. Toffler?
Mr. Chair, the Region of Appeal has indicated that there's an inconsistency in the proposal. Capacity, they understood to be 128 beds, and now is 280. So they're recommending a deferral of this application. Is the applicant aware of?
I think we just received that one. No, I think that one just came in, Region Appeal. And I believe our civil engineer has, we don't have that particular form of correspondence about the, we're talking about sewage and services and water. Again, existing building, same condition. I don't think they're understanding that it is the same building, and our engineer has addressed that to them.
Has staff looked at that as well? Is that something that was looked through the either zoning or planning process?
If I can perhaps just respond to that and try to add some clarity. The existing building 5, which is the V-shaped building on the right of the drawing, is an existing nursing home. Nursing beds are provided in there. The zoning bylaw limits nursing beds to that building. There was a variance back in March of last year to allow for the nursing bed component to be accommodated in Building 7. Building 5 was then to be used for other types of care, facility, and accommodation for seniors. And then the maximum total approved number of beds in 2017 was the 128 that the region's letter is addressing. Of course, the units haven't been built. Building 7 doesn't currently exist, and all of the nursing beds are still accommodated in Building 5. What the suggestion was from zoning staff in reviewing the site plan when the opportunity for additional beds came was the suggestion that because 120 beds maximum are permitted, and they're already permitted as of right in Building 5, and then with an additional number of beds permitted and anticipated in Building 7, up to a maximum of, I believe it's 160, which is what the variance is asking for today, and what planning staff is recommending as a total be accommodated in Building 7, so that based on the two buildings being maxed out at their total combined units of 280 nursing beds. So that's where the 280 came from, 120 existing, plus the 160 anticipated in Building 7 and approved in part through variance back last year.
I guess to Ms. Doppler's point is, from staff's perspective, and I know you're not going to speak for the region, but is it a misunderstanding of the previous approval at committee level? I know you can't speak to that, but with staff satisfied that the planning aspects or the building aspects are met through this process?
I would defer to planning staff who has carriage of the site plan in that regard. I can confirm that site plan approval would still be required. The region would be provided an opportunity to comment.
Yeah, just to reinstate that, yeah, the region would be able to comment through the additional story and the additional accommodation of the additional beds through the site plan application. Or revisions to the site plan application.
Okay, so I guess ask committee members if there aren't any comments taking into account planning's recommendations and the applicant's request.
Through you, Mr. Chair. Why is Building 7 being limited to 5 stories?
Because that's what the applicant has requested. And we're limiting it so that if it does go higher, that planning staff have the ability to come back to this decision.
Yeah, we don't object to that. We're not intending to build more than 5 stories, and once we've built the 5th story, we do have, residents around. We want to, it is the same community, so if we start building too high, we start impeding views, creating shadow lines, we have to lower rents. We want 5 stories and no higher. So we have no objection to them capping it at 5 stories.
Comments or questions? Then seeking a motion to proceed.
I guess, through you, Mr. Chair, I'm still struggling. So, we've got 128 beds. Is that in addition to the 160 beds?
So I'll just reiterate, this bed is currently capable of 128 by all previous committee of adjustments. The site plan approval is about to go in. The owner basically has to do with fiscal. Nursing home works best at 160 beds. We could not get new licenses. We're now in a position to receive new licenses. So to make a nursing home work, 160 beds is ideal. So it was a not-for-profit, and usually not-for-profit can handle 128 beds. But because of changes in the economy, our cousins to the south creating volatility with steel, prices have gone up. We really do need the 160 beds to make this work without serious subsidizing from the renters of this building. So this one is 128 plus 32 equals 160. This building had 120, we had moved these beds from here to here. We would like to now keep these 120 so that we have the flexibility while other nursing homes are constructing to use this as a potential swing stage. So those residents move in while the other buildings are being built. This is just one of the possibilities. We do not know if we're going to get the licenses. That could take years. We just would like the flexibility at this time. This we definitely need. This one is a nicety, but will help with the dollars and cents to keep this site moving. So the zoning officer suggested that we ask for these beds. We thought it was a good idea, and that's why we've asked for them. Yeah.
I would also tend to agree, and also taking into account the reputation of the applicant in its history in the community, and being an active participant and not trying to, for all intents and purposes, pull a fast one. I think it's something that, from my perspective, would be agreeable to. So I leave it to the committee to decide how to put forward the motion.
I'd like to move that approval be given to the applicant's application with an amendment to condition 3, the combined total of the maximum 280 beds.
Through the chair, can I suggest then that if you are going to go that route, that building 7 allow for a maximum of 160 and building 5 to a maximum of 120?
We would be in agreement with that.
That would be acceptable to me, and I would so move.
Okay. Any other questions or comments? Any seconder? Okay. All in favor? That carries. So that is approved with the modified condition number 3. And also, if I'm not mistaken, and I'm just for clarity, did we include the word generally on condition 1 as well? Okay, thank you, sir.
Thank you very much.
I'm just going to put forward the request that I believe the next item would be a little bit longer, perhaps to deal with 75 Stafford. Committee members? We're inclined? Sir, would you like to step forward?
Yes, gladly. My name is Nicholas Dell. I'm the authorized agent for this property. This, you may remember, was before you last year under a different proposal for accessory retail sales of motor vehicles in conjunction to a motor vehicle repair. The application has changed, and I'll give you a brief history on that while my throat holds up. It was the intent of the previous application to have some modest repair and some modest sales. No display is required. The property is already suited to allow for quite a lot of parking in the rear, and there's no real, sales is not the major component, and therefore they don't need any advertising as far as my client is concerned. In the process of obtaining or satisfying the conditions on the previous support from committee, we encountered some expensive upgrades that were needed as per the Ontario Building Code for heating and ventilation inside a unit that is offering repair. New rooftop unit, new bay door would need to be cut out and raised. It was exorbitant, and my client then asked me to do some further due diligence on other variances in the area of a similar use, but with less expensive triggers on the conditions, and I found that there was a variance very similar to what's before you today for an existing office that had accessory motor vehicle sales, and so that's what you're seeing before you. There's no outdoor display, and I understand through staff that we are limiting the size of the actual office portion, which we're in agreement to, and I've seen the conditions and staff comments, and I'm in agreement with those as well. I'd be happy to answer any questions you have.
Sir. Committee members, are there any questions to the agent? Seeing none, is there anyone in the audience here to speak on this application? Seeing none, staff, would you like to weigh in with your comments, please?
Staff are in support of this application, A18-049, subject to the following conditions. 1, an occupancy permit shall be obtained for the motor vehicle sales and associated office within 90 days of the date of the decision of the committee. Number 2, that the office use only be permitted in association with the motor vehicle sales. 3, that the motor vehicle sales and associated office use be limited to 1,100 square feet. Number 4, that no parking within the front yard shall be used for the purposes of vehicle sales or display. Number 5, that all motor vehicle repairs are conducted within the building. Number 6, that the approval be granted for a temporary period of 5 years from the date of the committee's decision. Number 7, that the previously approved variance file A17-125 be declared null and void. And 8, that failure to comply with and maintain the conditions of the committee shall render the approval null and void.
Thank you. Any questions by committee members to staff? So, sir, you've indicated that those conditions are all agreeable to you?
To you, Mr. Chair, yes.
Thank you. Seeking a motion to proceed then.
Approve with conditions.
Motion to approve with conditions by Mr. Crouch.
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Chada. All in favor? That carries. That is approved, sir.
Thank you.
Thank
I
you.
appreciate you bumping me forward a little bit. Sorry I wasn't here earlier. Thank you, Stephen. Thanks, Elizabeth.
Calling applications A18030 and A18031, 196-8610 and 196-8611 Ontario Limited. Properties are located on the corner of Inspire Boulevard, Dixie Road, and East Strong.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman again and committee. It's Michael Gagnon. I'm joined by Anthony Siriani of my office. And before we get started, I'd just like to hand out a document, Ever the Optimist. It is a set of proposed conditions of approval, which I'd like to put before the committee. Should be enough there for staff as well.
Mr. Daniel, I would suggest, staff as well.
Yes.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, this plan, which is attached, do you have enough copies?
Yes, we do.
I hope, okay. The plan which is attached is also part of the materials which was filed on March 19th by our office. It's been slightly modified for the purposes of clarity. If in fact the application's approved, it'll be attached to help provide guidance in the future as we go forward. This is an application which I'd like to thank you first for providing us the opportunity to come back to committee through a deferral. The staff have been helpful and patient with us. When we were here last time, we said we wanted to review the report, we wanted to meet with them, and we wanted an opportunity to work with our client. We've done that. So I do want to thank staff for their time in that regard. In terms of all the materials which you have received, there is a fair amount of it, but I want to focus today on the package which has a cover letter dated March 19, 2018 from our office, and it's addressed to Alan Parsons. This will be the easiest one, and what it does is it builds on the previous submissions. You'll recall that we had one submission which was the actual 2 applications to the committee, and then we had filed a bound booklet that is similar to this one here with a series of committee of adjustment applications which were filed for other automotive commercial dealerships in this immediate area, all of which were supported by the staff and approved by the committee after your consideration. But we're going to focus primarily today on the March 19th cover letter and the presentation that's attached to it. Before getting into the details of it, though, I'll just, for the record, reiterate what the variances are. They're similar for both blocks 10 and 11, and it's to allow a motor vehicle sales, leasing, and rental establishment, and to allow a motor vehicle repair and body shop as accessory to a motor vehicle sales, leasing, and rental establishment, whereas the bylaw does not permit the proposed uses, and secondly, to allow outside storage for the display of motor vehicles for sale and lease, whereas the bylaw does not permit outside storage. So we have reviewed the staff report, and it's not substantially different than what was previously filed. And I believe that the information which we have put before the committee satisfactorily addresses the issues that were raised by the staff. So what I'd like to do at this time is just go through the presentation booklet, which was attached to the letter. And it's this presentation that is dated March 8th, 2018. So before I get underway, I just want to make sure that in the volume of material that all the committee and staff have it. I think Neil has it.
Yes, I do, Mr. Chairman.
And what I'm going to try and do, because I know that you're familiar with the application, I'm not going to labor in great detail on each of the slides, but there's some that I might linger a little bit to provide a little bit of clarification. So first off, you can see the subject site here. It's these 2 properties here, which front onto Inspire Boulevard and also onto Dixie Road to the east and Ace Drive to the west. For a greater contextual reference, we have Mayfield Road across the top. We have the Highway 410 to the west. And then this area here, which I'm outlining, is what is known as the original Brampton 410 Auto Mall. So we are just across the street and slightly to the south. That sort of puts us in a context. Okay. I did go over the requested variances, and in large part, the reason we're here for both of these is because of the activity that has taken place not only in the original Auto Mall, but through subsequent applications to expand the Auto Mall beyond its original boundaries, which were contemplated through the secondary plan and the zoning. Pages 2, 3, and 4 of your package include the original proposed site plans showing on page 2 both of the sites together. Block 10 on the east shows one of the dealerships in this location. Block 11 to the west shows a dealership in this location. And what our clients had done without any prompting from us when we first met them was, because they know they are in the car business, they have some 30 dealerships in their stable of dealerships. They understand the concern that most municipalities, and Brampton has it as well, of car dealerships being pushed back from street frontages, which results in a lot of cars being put between the street line and the building. What they have done right off the bat is they put both buildings right up at the intersection so that we have a greater street presence and a defined street wall with buildings, which is something that is generally considered desirable by most planning departments, and I know certainly in Brampton, because we've done car dealerships with them and we've been scolded for having the buildings put back and cars sitting in front. So I was shocked, but my clients assured me that in terms of a direction, this is a direction that they're going. The industry is a more urban approach to the car dealerships, so that's what this shows. What this does is these two buildings effectively screen a lot of the parking behind the buildings and away from the prominent intersections. Fortunately, we have sites that are large enough to accommodate all the required parking for staff, guests, and new car inventory. And here is a rendering of the project, which we think is really attractive. This would be an image which would be, of course, improved, and there would be design refinement through site plan approval of what the site might look like at Inspire and Dixie Road. So the building is brought up close to the corner. This allows for an attractive corner treatment of building facade, which is 2 stories in accordance with the minimum in the bylaw, and a landscaped forecourt. This as opposed to the typical car dealership that has cars sitting right in front of the building. We also have a pedestrian scale main entrance, which is in this location, which would be sitting right on Inspire Boulevard. Once again, you can see the cars you see here are those on Inspire, not the property itself. So we're very sensitive to the urban design objectives. And then the clients are proposing a 2-story building facade with heavily glazed to make the building more translucent and more attractive to the neighborhood. And it is understood that we'll work with the staff to improve upon this to make sure that it complies with the intent and purpose of any design requirements for this development, or that the municipality is currently pursuing through site plan approval. But we're quite happy with the client and his efforts to respond to the municipality's concerns about design. And we certainly, as you can tell, we haven't rushed the application. We would like to work with the staff on the design, and obviously that's contingent on securing a positive endorsement here today so that we can get on with that next stage in the process. The next several pages are very preliminary elevations, which I'm not going to deal with those, but I want to go to page 8 in your document. And this is very important to contrast what was accomplished when we deferred the application. And I've heard from my staff, who you see more often than myself here, that one of the things that the committee during its tenure has been mentioning, not only to my staff but to others who come before the committee, if there are issues and you go back with a deferral, the committee, as I understand it, and the staff expectation, the way we're interpreting, is that there's going to be an effort on the part of the applicants to try and demonstrate that you're listening to the comments that staff are making. And in that respect, there was a concern about the automotive uses here and what it would mean for urban design, what it would mean for the parking areas, and how that the storage of new cars would be dealt with on the site, and what the streetscape is going to look like. So what this is, if you recall earlier in the presentation this morning, I showed you where we had the 2 automotive buildings at the corners, and these are the intersections. After our deferral, our client, and you have this along with the conditions of approval, directed that we work with our architect to propose 2 new buildings. Because one of the issues we heard as well is that they were concerned that with the growth of the auto mall beyond its original boundaries, that there was just automotive dealerships in this employment area. And the sad truth is, this employment area has no other uses except automotive dealerships. But the good news is you probably have an auto mall now, which will, as it continues to grow beyond its original boundaries, become probably a preeminent auto mall in the Western GTA. But we listened to the concerns about there's no other land uses, there should be some other things happening, and this property had a prohibition regarding automotive dealerships. The only place that they're actually permitted is within the original auto mall, not even within the area beyond which the committee has dealt with. But what our client said is he wanted us to advance 2 additional buildings. 2,000 square meters is about 21,000 square feet. It's significant. About 100 cars would be required to service the restaurant and retail uses that are permitted. And what we've effectively done is we now have an Inspire Boulevard frontage that has no cars parked on it at all. It's very urban. We have almost a continuous urban street wall. It hides the parking behind the building, and what we're envisaging here, even though it may be difficult at first to lease it up, there will be a restaurant which will provide service to the employment area, which is predominantly automotive dealerships, but also to anyone else who happens to be traveling through this area or to the resident population to the east of this area. I discussed this with my client, one of the representatives here today, and I said, well, you know, if you're sure, because 20,000 square feet is no small potatoes, it's a big building. If you were even to put, you know, a modest price tag of $200 a foot to build this space and finish the space, you're looking at millions of dollars. The response I got was, we know we'll be able to put a restaurant there. The rest of the space will work hard at making sure that we can fill it up. One of the concerns they had, and we have though, is the impact if this site that you're looking at and the one to the south of it were to go with service commercial. As you know, there are some live-work units just to the east. Half of those units, and I have photographs in the package, are empty. They've been standing for quite some time. Live-work units are a tough go at the best of times. It makes it even harder if you have too much space in the area chasing too few dollars in customers. But at 20,000 square feet in this location, with the types of uses that we're envisaging here, we believe that it will complement, but more importantly, and this goes back to the point of listening to the committee, I wasn't going to come back here today with just the original building. 2 buildings. I wanted to come back here with something that was substantially different that showed that we were listening. And in fact, Mr. Chairman, these 2 buildings would be proposed to comply with the zoning bylaw, the uses and the setbacks and the parking. And that would be one of the provisos. So that the staff said they wanted some of the uses that are permitted in this area, and this would accommodate it. So that's why you see that different plan.
Interject 1 second. I believe there was a question.
Just sorry to interrupt you, Mr. Gannon, through you, Mr. Chair. Just quickly, if these 2 new buildings proposed in the middle, is combined 20,000 or 20,000 each?
A combined area of 20,000.
So 10 and 10.
10 and 10, approximately, yes.
Thank
you. Yeah. And very important, your zoning bylaw for this piece of land, for both of these properties, requires that the minimum building height be 2 stories. So what we're proposing, and I've cleared this with our clients so they fully understand, is the 2 buildings you're seeing here, the additional buildings would be 2 stories in height. So we would have even a greater mix of uses, because on the ground floor you have your restaurant, some retail, personal service, and you'll have some office upstairs. We've already started discussing how that office could be used. You could have insurance brokers there, finance companies. When we start to work through it, it's starting to make a little more sense, but we're prepared to commit to doing this space as part of it. And it would be 2 stories similar to the dealerships. And we're not asking any other variances for those 2 buildings. We want to work within the bylaw. Yep. So I'll come back to this in a minute. So several pages here, and I'll go through it fairly quickly because I believe that you're familiar with the issues. This one, we summarize the designations. What is important, though, I think, this is from the official plan, the regional plan, the city plan, and the secondary plan, is that the subject property here is Prestige Industrial, as is all the land to the north, the west, and the south, including the Auto Mall. Auto Mall, original Auto Mall is Area 3. Our client's property is Area 4. This area, and number 2 is a gas station. So there's a new gas station going there. It's a pretty good looking gas station, but it's a gas station nonetheless. You've got auto dealerships that are filling up this area now, and then in this area as well where the pointer is. So effectively, 2, 3, 4, and this area here represents, if the committee is inclined to support the applications, sort of the evolving, expanded auto mall, all anchored on the original approval that was provided in this area. And the lands outside of our client's property were supposed to be a Prestige Industrial. Now, we've included the extracts, and this is my staff who actually recommended this, because I kept telling them, you know, describe what's in the OP, and they said, how about we just give them the OP policies instead of this creative writing exercise, Michael? So I said, thank you, it's a good idea. We've just included it, so there's no question. But we've highlighted in yellow that one of the things that the Countryside Villages Plan called for was employment and density targets, and we've outlined that here. And it specifically talks about the area at 410 and Dixie. It's our submission that, and we've seen it, and you as committee members have seen it in previous reports, the ones that are in this Committee of Adjustment anthology here, is that the dealerships between the sales staff, the office staff, the finance staff, and the mechanics, and all the other associated staff, a typical dealership in the Auto Mall is producing about 150 to 160 to 200 jobs, depending on the nature of the dealership. I would suggest that what we're proposing here is continuing that trend and opportunity to create more employment, because right now this employment area hasn't produced any jobs. The Metris developed these lands. They haven't been able to get anybody to purchase any lands in this area to build Prestige Industrial uses. I think that, you know, through the work of the staff and the committee on previous applications, the area has found its niche as a premier automotive dealership area, a premier auto mall. But the benefit is this: it's not just a matter that we're selling cars, we're actually creating employment equal to or greater than what could be created if, in fact, the Prestige Industrial uses were to materialize. It's my submission that they haven't materialized. So thankfully we have the automotive dealerships because they're creating that employment, which is going to feed the live-work units, which will feed now the additional 20,000 square feet of space that's permitted as of right, which we're recommending here. I'd also like to say that when our client indicated that he's prepared to build the additional 20,000 square feet, he's now increased the employment that will be generated from this property by a significant factor. And the way we were able to do it is that we have surplus parking associated with the two dealerships, which is very important. That allowed us to come forward with that extra space. This is also on page 11 from the secondary plan, and what you have here are the policies for Section 4. And if you were to take the time to read through this, what I find surprising and remarkable, and this comes to, you know, the question of is what we're proposing appropriate and desirable? When you look at policy 641, it indicates that within this area you can have offices, with the exception of medical. You can have a funeral home, you can have a restaurant, limited retail, service commercial, institutional uses, an ambulance station, and a place of worship. It's my submission that the employment that will be generated by these two dealerships and the additional service commercial space now will probably exceed a lot of what you would see generated by some of the as-of-right permitted uses. I also think that with the way that the site is being configured, and by having that sketch attached to the decision, we would have to have a site plan that's substantially in compliance with this. you're going to end up with a very good-looking site. And by the time we finish going through this rigorous site plan approval process, which staff will be administering, it will look great at the end of the day. And we will create that additional employment. And I'm not certain that this is the best site for a funeral home or an ambulance station. I would rather have what we're proposing here, with the greatest of respect, to the secondary plan. Now, there's been a lot of discussion about what is and isn't allowed in Area 4. And I said it this morning, I understand there's this notion of a prohibition within Area 4. But Area 3, which is the original auto mall, is the only area where there's an express permission for automotive. In that other prestige industrial area where the committee has received endorsing reports from staff to approve other dealerships, the plan is silent. But by virtue of the fact that it's very overt in Area 3, which are these policies, it's my submission that it is as legitimate to seek an approval today to have automotive dealerships as it was when the other applications proceeded in front of the committee. This is the service commercial zoning, and you can see that the original auto mall, which is in this area, and where the auto mall has grown in this area on Dockstetter, north of Dockstetter as well, and over here, they have the same prestige industrial designation. And I won't go through all your hard work on those previous decisions, but all those decisions talked about the proximity of the new applications to the existing auto mall, and the staff reports were favorable because of the proximity of the proposed uses to the established auto mall and the goals and intent of the municipality in that respect. As I mentioned, I think we've got a real success story on our hands with the dealerships. Just forgive me for a second, I've got a bit of a cold. Okay. Now, there are a list of uses here, and you can see in a general service commercial, you can have retailing, a personal service shop, a bank, a trust company, office, dry cleaning, laundromat, parking lot, dining room restaurant, convenience, takeout, printing and copying, garden center, community center, and it goes on. And now those are the general ones, and then under general commercial, then they have some other ones, place of worship, day nursery, etc. But we have a special section which applies to our clients' properties and those to the south. And those are found on page 14 of the submission. They're remarkably similar to the general service commercial. And what you see here, again, without going through all of them, you'll have the office, the retail, the funeral home, dry cleaning, and what have you. No drive-throughs are permitted. We're not seeking one either through this application. But to my earlier point, over here on the building height, on the right, you can see minimum building height 2 stories, and we will adhere to that minimum building height requirement for all 4 buildings that are proposed at this time. The rest of the pages in your package deal with the zoning applicable to the industrial area, the prestige industrial, and I want to move along, though, to page 22. And that's a graphic that really captures the earlier point I made about the expansion and the evolution of the auto mall. Brampton has a success story on its hand. This committee contributed to that, working with the staff. You can see here that the pink area is the original boundary of the auto mall as defined in the zoning bylaw and the secondary plan. The parcel to the south is where there was a committee of adjustment that was approved. Then the committee approved applications on these parcels going beyond the limit established by Ace Drive and also going north and south of Dockstetter. A lot of the arguments here were that proposals for automotive dealerships here were acceptable because of the proximity to the auto mall. And that argument was used over and over again as this continued to grow, as was the argument about the employment associated with it. But I thought this was a really great graphic because in a snapshot, you get to see it and understand the magnitude. And I'll be very clear, as I've used the argument here before, there is no precedent, and I'm not here saying that there's a precedent for this, but what I am here saying today is that the arguments that staff advanced and the committee had accepted for previous Committee of Adjustments equally apply to this area that we're bringing forward to today, with the added benefit, whereas none of those other Committee of Adjustments built even 1 square foot of prestige industrial space or as of right permitted space, our clients committed to building 20,000 square feet, 2,000 meters squared. So we are actually bringing to the table the as of right permitted uses. So the automotive is then an adjunct as part of a master plan for the development of these lands. The next 2 pages are simply a summary of what's in the larger booklet on the Committee of Adjustment. And you can see that we've underlined the status of all of those C of A applications, indicating that they were basically approved. And again, in the red hatched line here, you see the limits of the original auto mall. So there was a lot of analysis that went on. Like each of these reports, the staff did the review of the 4 tests, they look at their OP, and it wasn't like they only had one chance to do their analysis, they did it over and over again on multiple applications. I think they've studied the area quite sufficiently through that exercise. Maybe not, and I don't think they've had one as detailed as this, and you're probably saying, thank goodness, because you get enough paper from us, but there's been lots of analysis done in our opinion, and that's what's on these pages as a summary. Now I've got a few graphics, and then I'm going to go to the 4 tests. This is the live work space on page 25, which is just to the east of our client's property on Inspire. These units are in here. And if you look closely, you'll see that sort of a classic live work unit, 3-story profile. Downstairs you have a commercial unit, an office unit, and then upstairs you have the residence. If you look closely at these photographs, and if you take a drive out there, a lot of these storefronts are empty. There's no businesses there. And then the businesses that are there are not what I would call AAA sort of covenants or franchises. There are a lot of, for lack of a better term, ma-pa sort of operations where somebody's running a takeout restaurant, somebody is doing alterations to clothing, you might have a chiropractor, but you're not having sort of the brand name businesses that actually create significant employment. With the 20,000 square feet of service commercial space and then the 2 automotive dealerships, we're expecting now with the additional space over 200 jobs being generated. The other thing is that we're going to not be of a size on the service commercial which will cannibalize the business that is already starting to be drawn to some of these. We'll be offering a sort of, at least on the ground floor, an opportunity for some of the larger sort of retail and service commercial operators to locate in this area. There's concerns in the staff report about parking. Well, these are standalone restaurants, and we're allowed to have restaurants in the zoning. A lot of restaurants, we know that the parking standard for restaurants is very high. So there's no guarantee that you're not going to have parking associated with the as of right permitted uses. But what you will have through this application is an opportunity to make sure that the Inspire Boulevard frontage is pretty much car-free and that we have a proper urban streetscape created, not dissimilar to the live-work units to the east. But this goes to show that if it's an old restaurant or a newer one, you do have parking associated with other permitted uses. These are some images of industrial malls, and Industrial malls have lots of parking. They have lots of, for their condominium, lots of individual small units. And they also have the additional aspect of the parking of trucks and vehicles that are loading and unloading. We won't have that issue to the greatest extent possible, save and except for when there's delivery of new vehicles to the dealerships, which we have suggested a condition similar to what you've done in others, where that would have to happen interior to the site, which we've taken from previous staff reports and conditions of approval. But we believe that what we're proposing, subject to site plan approval, will be head and shoulders above a typical industrial mall. And then funeral homes. So this is going to the issue of parking. We're all going to eventually die. We'll all be, someone will come hopefully to visit even me one day. My son-in-law, he'll come, I hope. But we're all going to be faced with this. What's a common thing? Parking. So even with the funeral homes, it's not as though you'll have a funeral home here that does not have a large parking lot associated with it. There will be a lot of parking. And I put this here because, again, I think that the comments about the parking lots and outside storage is a little bit sort of misunderstood. It's not to suggest that with the service commercial uses and prestige industrial, you don't have a blacktop. You do. You have a lot of parking. You have loading areas. The outside storage that we have is car parking. And I believe the intent of the provisions that say no outside storage has to do with skids of product. If you're a manufacturer, or if you have raw material coming in on skids and you're waiting to bring it into your production facility, that's the kind of outside storage you don't want. I would suggest that a car that is an employee to an automotive dealership, or a car of an employee at a funeral home, or a visitor to a funeral home, or a visitor to a car dealership, a car is a car. We're not storing transmissions outside. We're not storing doors. We're not doing that here. It's an automotive dealership, similar to everything that's already been approved or is being approved right in the immediate area. So that takes us through the presentation. A lot of that you saw earlier. The key thing in earlier submissions, but the key thing is we have the 2 additional buildings. And now I went through the staff reports, pardon me, thinking about the 4 tests. And I've known Neil for 30 years, and he's been very generous over the years and been patient with me. But he knows I read what he writes. And he makes me work every day hard. So we take it seriously. We went through the 4 tests, and on the official plan, without laboring over the point, the range of permitted uses right now, which is does allow office, it does allow retail, it does allow parking, is not dissimilar to what we are proposing on the site, and not dissimilar to what the City of Brampton has supported immediately to the north and to the west. So our suggestion is that in terms of the intent of the official plan, the application does in fact adhere to it, and the way we're positioning the buildings and prepared to agree to this plan being attached to a decision, we will contribute to the creation along Inspire Boulevard of an attractive main street, and that is our objective with this application. If the committee is inclined to support us, we will have to go through a process of site plan approval where the design guideline for this industrial employment area will be administered, and our architect will work through that with the staff. So we're not getting around that. We just want to work through that with them in the context of an endorsement from the committee with appropriate conditions of approval. The staff have, one of the issues they raise is that they think this should be done through an OPA and a secondary plan and zoning. It's our respectful submission that there has been so much evaluation done to the area as it relates to the other applications which have come before the committee. And regardless of what was done there, my staff got a sort of a baptism by fire when they joined us, and Anthony have worked very hard to bring together what we believe is a significant analysis that when you couple it with the work that staff has done before, we have basically answered any of the significant questions that would be raised through an amendment application. It's also my submission that we don't need to do an amendment application because the application has enough of the characteristics and accomplishes enough of the intent and purpose of the official plan that it's certainly within the purview of this committee and staff to advance an application and consider it. There is also talk about, well, what about the viability of the employment lands? Well, the fact of the matter is the employment lands, save and except for automotive dealerships, hasn't been viable. That's one way of looking at it, but I would look at it the other way. It has been a success with the automotive dealerships there, and probably staff and the original developer, when they did the plan, never expected the automotive dealership and the automotive mall to take off the way it has. Virtually every major brand wants to be in this auto mall. It's in the right location. You have a highway interchange, you have a nice big piece of land, you have some street frontage, it works. And we're prepared to make sure that these dealerships and the additional retail service commercial buildings are great looking. And we will create and add to the employment in the area. So we then go to the zoning bylaw. I alluded to this a little bit before about the prohibition. Well, the fact of the matter is, anybody who comes before the committee saying, and we heard the Stafford application, he wants to sell some cars where the use is not permitted. Well, that's why we're coming here. The question is, whatever anybody's bringing to the committee is because what they're proposing either doesn't conform to a use or it doesn't conform to a performance standard. The real test, in our opinion, is how does it conform to the intent of the zoning bylaw? In the zoning bylaw, and we have it here in bold, we have got the offices, the retail, the bank and trust company, etc., etc. What we are doing here is we are bringing forward state-of-the-art car dealerships and now some service commercial that will, in fact, include office components. There will be parking lots. There will be a loading area. All of these attributes of a modern car dealership are similar to what will transpire if the as-of-right permitted uses were to dominate the site. But what we're doing, as I said, is one better than anybody else who came before you, is we're gonna commit to building the additional space, and we're gonna make a go of it. We're gonna try very hard to make a go of it. And if, in fact, we were going to be purists, collectively the royal we, I would suggest that, and I don't believe it the case to be, that somebody might argue that none of those other committee of adjustments should have been approved beyond the limits of the original auto mall because there was an express permission there. But that's not what the committee did. I think the committee did the right thing in realizing that that auto mall wasn't large enough, and through the applications that came forward, the committee realized that you could accomplish the intent and purpose of the zoning bylaw and the official plan through the approval of those applications, in my respectful submission. The outdoor storage, I've alluded to that here. I've talked about the number of jobs. And outdoor storage, I don't believe applies to brand new General Motors cars or brand new Audis. I think the outside storage is raw material and finished or semi-finished products being stored on a site. That doesn't apply to what we're doing here. Then the third test is it desirable? And I would suggest that it is. We're going to be creating employment in an area where, save and except for the automotive dealerships, there would be no other employment. The committee has already approved applications, not to suggest this is a precedent, but you did the right thing in looking at what was going to be accomplished and if those applications were desirable. I would say the application here today is every bit as desirable, and even more so now with the additional buildings. I've addressed the intent and spirit, and Is it desirable? I would suggest that with the images that we've shown you, which are just the preliminary ones, what will be built here will have a fantastic looking frontage along Inspire Boulevard, and the placement of the automotive dealerships right up at the corner will accomplish what none of the other car dealerships in this area have. You will have a proper street frontage that will not be occupied by either customer vehicles or new cars on display. You'll be able to, as they say, go to town on the landscaping at those intersections and have these buildings sitting in a landscape setting that I think at the end of the day we'll all be very proud of when this is built. On page 34, and to show that Neil and the staff, I read what they write as well, I've got a quote here from one of their reports. And it says, the subject property is located on the east side of Ace Drive, just south of Mayfield Road. It is directly across the street from an auto mall comprised of various automotive dealerships. For all intents and purposes, the proposal is a logical extension to the auto mall and is desirable for the appropriate development of the land. I couldn't say it better myself. And I think that that statement applies equally to the desirability of what we're bringing forward here today. And I give credit to the staff where credit's due on that. Lastly, is it minor? I would suggest that this application is really no different than the other applications which were supported by the staff. And we're selling a product here. Retailing is allowed in this area. We will be repairing and fixing cars here inside the buildings. That's allowed in a prestige industrial area. And that sort of activity also does take place as an adjunct to some of the service commercial activities. So I think that it is a minor application in that regard. And what's interesting is the city staff themselves, when they were talking about the other applications beyond the limits of the auto mall, about the context of those proposals in an employment area, and I've underlined it, they said themselves that auto dealerships are commonly found in employment areas. So they're right. They're commonly found in big numbers in this employment zone, most certainly. And we believe that the application before you is a good one in that regard and builds on what they've done before. I'm going to finish with another quote from, again, one of the dealership applications. The proposed motor vehicle sales use will be compatible with the planned industrial uses in the area and will not hinder the ability of the city to achieve our density targets. Subject to the recommended conditions of approval regarding vehicle loading off of the public right-of-way, the proposed variance is minor in nature. And on that issue there, in the proposed conditions of approval, we actually have recommended that a similar condition be included if you're so inclined to support this application, so that we too don't have trucks unloading on the right-of-way. A good example where that happens now is on Queen Street near Colony Ford. That's an old site. You don't really have any control over that. But here, I think it's appropriate that it be restricted to the interior of the site, and we're prepared to do that. So, Mr. Chairman and committee, those are our submissions, and I'll just leave you with the plan we would like attached to the decision, if you're inclined to approve it, and then the conditions of approval, which are the cover page. We've indicated there that the plan would have to be in general accordance when we file for site plan approval, showing the 2 dealerships and the 2 additional buildings. We've specified the minimum combined size of those additional buildings. In point number 2, we're indicating here that the 2 additional buildings would have to accommodate commercial land uses as permitted in the zoning bylaw, and that would exclude, though, a place of worship, a community club, or a funeral home, because what we want to try and do is pick up on the service commercial and commercial activities so that there's a little bit more interaction and an opportunity for interaction during the day between employees in the area and the people who live in the area and the traveling public. We don't believe that a place of worship, a community club, or a funeral home would be a good fit. they won't generate that sort of 7-day-a-week potential activity that we think would be more desirable within this area. The third condition is that the automotive dealerships and the 2 additional buildings would have to comply with the minimum parking, setback, and building height requirements. I labored over this with my client yesterday because I wanted him to understand that you're not going to build 2 squat little 1-story buildings between the 2 dealerships. We want a kind of a 2-story building profile running the whole length of the street. He understands, and it's in writing. So he said, no problem. We can do that. Point number 4 is picking up on the comment I made a few minutes ago about the loading of trucks. There's no loading allowed on Inspire, Ace, or Dixie. It's got to be interior to the site, so you're not going to be disrupting the traveling public that are using Dixie or Ace or Inspire. In addition to that, point number 5, we are going to have to file for site plan approval for the 2 dealerships and the 2 additional buildings within 12 months. And that is a process that's administered by the planning department. We will have to obtain, number 6, site plan approval, and that if you're inclined to support this, that it's only for the variances that are stated in the notice, and then if we don't comply, the decision's null and void. So we tried to pick up language from other staff reports, and we envisage the schedule being attached and the plan, so you're not, through you, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Crouch this morning had raised, and rightfully so, concerns about an applicant who didn't have a sketch. So that the worst thing is in the future, like, what did you mean? So the idea is to attach this sketch, the one on the screen, to a decision so that when we sit down, if we're lucky enough to do that for site plan approval, this becomes the basis for where we start with them. Those are my submissions, and if I haven't covered anything, I'll try and answer your questions to the best of my ability.
Thank you, sir. It was quite thorough. Guess we'll pick up on any staff comments and then we'll take it from there. I don't see anyone in the audience, but I'll ask, is there anyone in the audience here to speak on this application? Seeing none, staff, would you like to weigh in with your comments, please?
Good morning, Mr. Chairman,
Good morning,
members of the committee, ladies and gentlemen, colleagues that are here. Staff appreciates the robust nature of Mr. Gagnon's submissions and appreciate the detail that Mr. Gagnon went into in presenting the application and applications to the committee. With that said, then, Mr. Chairman, we can't support the proposed variances based upon the 4 tests. And I'll precis some of the key points in the report. The report is, out of necessity, lengthy, so I will, with your indulgence, Mr. Chair, I will proceed. The issue with respect to conformity to the intent of the official plan, Mr. Chairman, lies with the detailed designations of the Countryside Villages secondary plan. And in that respect, the property is designated Prestige Industrial and Special Policy Area number 4. There are a range of permitted uses within that designation. And the issue is that there are policies that specifically state that motor vehicle commercial uses shall not be permitted. Retail uses shall be limited to a maximum of 1,000 square meters. And outdoor storage of goods and materials shall be prohibited. And those policies relate to the design aspects of that section of Inspire Boulevard west of Dixie Road, pertaining to the associated community design guidelines that form part of that secondary plan. And in that respect, Inspire Boulevard is, from a design perspective, certainly a structuring element within the community design guidelines. And we believe then that staff is of the opinion that the proposed motor vehicle commercial sales use with the outdoor storage does not conform to the intent of those policies in the secondary plan. And indeed, as Mr. Gagnon mentioned, staff is of the opinion that in order to fully and completely explore the proposal, would require the submission of an official plan amendment and an associated application to amend the zoning bylaw. With respect to the second test, Mr. Chairman, conforms to the intent of the zoning bylaw. There are some specific permitted uses that are contained in the zoning bylaw. Again, though, Mr. Chairman, the proposed motor vehicle sales, leasing, and rental establishment and the accessory motor vehicle repair shop is not a permitted use under the site-specific service commercial zone. Neither is it a permitted use within the parent service commercial zone. And the site-specific zone does prohibit outdoor storage. Accordingly, staff's of the opinion that the application does not meet that second test. Turning to the third and fourth test, Mr. Chairman, desirable for the appropriate development of land, we feel that the proposal is a significant deviation from the existing framework that I've just mentioned to you, the policies, the zoning bylaw, and the community design guidelines as well, and that a comprehensive evaluation of the proposal is necessary then, Mr. Chairman, through a formal application to amend the official plan and zoning bylaw. And ending, Mr. Chairman, with the final test, minor in nature, staff's of the opinion that the application does not conform to the intent of the Countryside Villages secondary plan and the zoning bylaw. And we're of the opinion, accordingly, Mr. Chairman, that the application is not minor in nature. That concludes the synopsis of the report, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, sir. Are there any questions by committee members to staff or to the agent?
You declared a red line because of urban design requirements for Inspire on the other side of the road.
Through you, Mr. Chairman, yes, in part staff has with respect to the second test. The community design guidelines are a relatively detailed document, and they do speak to the design for not only this section or this segment of Inspire Boulevard, but also the section of Inspire Boulevard that is east of Dixie Road as well, Mr. Chairman.
So the only concern you have with this site with respect to the site immediately to the north that we already made a decision about is this frontage along Inspire?
Through you, Mr. Chairman, no, that's not the only concern. That is certainly a concern from a design perspective, but our concern is with respect to the very detailed policies in the secondary plan that specifically prohibit this proposed use, and in the zoning bylaw as well, through you, Mr. Chairman.
Did those prohibitions not apply to the northern half of this block?
Through you, Mr. Chairman, it's my understanding, if you're speaking of the lands that are to the north of the property, thank you. My understanding is that there is a different policy and regulatory framework in play for those lands. I just don't have that framework and those policies in front of me right now.
Mr. Chair, we are very thankful for all the information. Obviously, there's a lot of information. I've had the opportunity to review it. The booklet that was provided, I've looked at that in quite some detail. Every application that came before this committee was supported by staff, and it was in turn supported by this committee. I noted that under Block 9, the application that came forward, that it also referred to the character as it would relate to Inspire Boulevard, even though it wasn't fronting on Inspire. But in that case, the city comments were that as long as trucks were offloaded on the site, that would be acceptable. So if we look at all of what has come before this committee and everything was acceptable and approved by both city and committee, and specifically Block 9 refers to the Inspire Boulevard, I have difficulty understanding what the problem with approving both of these lots that are before us. And I think I would just like to say, if these two lots were on the other side of Inspire, or if they were the first ones on the south side of Docksdale Boulevard, I could understand the rationale that there's a line being drawn, a physical barrier that starts to say, okay, the auto mall, as we know it, started off under the block 1, it's now expanded, but I see the natural progression for block 10 and 11 to form part of the auto mall, especially and including because block 2 also was included. So we seem to be just either closing the loop for the auto mall or continuing it forward to the south. I'm not an expert on these things, but I just see that blocks 10 and 11 follow suit with everything that's been acceptable and approved, as we find that whether it's zoning or under the official plan or uses under prestige industrial, I don't know all the details unless I read them, but they all seem to pertain to these two lots as they did to the other two lots. So it's just a comment, because I'm having difficulty understanding the concerns on the city's part when all of these previous applications were fully supported.
Okay. Any other questions? I tend to agree with both comments. Understanding and respecting where staff is coming from, in particular noting the difference in the zoning of these two blocks in the service commercial. From the explanation and from all the information we've been given, the spirit, though, is where I continuously go back to. The spirit into the what we're trying to accomplish by these 4 tests, because I'm of the opinion as well, is if it was not a deviation from what was acceptable, it would not be before us. From my perspective, our goal is to try and continue and meet that spirit of what is trying to be accomplished. The continuation of Inspire, as it may have been rational when it was commenced with the expansion of this auto mall, which has evolved, we have approved, changes the character of Inspire implicitly. And I think, and I tend to very much agree to, when you're driving that site, Inspire to the east of Dixie will be best served by having employment uses there that can actually sustain, as opposed to further exacerbating potential difficulties that, as a small business owner myself, I can foresee that being a future problem. The main variable from my perspective, and again, appreciating staff's perspective, is that a natural course of separation is Dixie, and from Ms. Doffler's point, and as is, I guess, on the slide, is the true highlight of an automotive outline, and having Inspire be the actual defining line. If it evolves into the south, that's something that we can't foresee or we can't speak to right now. But that's where I think my headspace is. In particular, when we're also using, and again, Mr. Gagnon and his firm are definitely tree killers, but it is beneficial in terms of our understanding. When staff uses the prohibition clause, which I understand and respect that, because that's something that raised my eyebrows significantly, in particular, before we had the opportunity to revisit this. But I think what is negated from my perspective in the staff's recommendations on is we tend to include the policies in 6.4 and 6.42, 3, and 4, but unlike the previous, and again, I highlight and I use that term as well, it's not precedent setting, but in terms of forming a rationale, is sections 5.2, 1.2, and sections 5.22. the employment and aspects, and then the similarity industrial, the prestige industrial aspects, for my opinion, do meet those tests, and from my perspective, they are met, and that's something that I would contend to and agree with. So that's just my 2 cents. Any other comments or questions by committee members?
Just some comments for you, Mr. Chair. Most of the stuff I was just going around my mind is already covered by three of you, my colleagues on this committee. Based in just my personal experience has inspired Boulevard keep coming east of Dixie. Part of my job is, I have some work in that neighborhood, and I do realize the issues facing those live-home units, parking, and be able to attract some, good-named businesses as obviously how many salons you can put together in every unit as parking is limited, and that's the reason many of my customers have contacted me over the course of 2-3 years, ever since those communities are there, have these issues that they are able to get. Because of the location, in my opinion, maybe in the future, they might be fine once the entire community has built. In the number 2 here in the staff report, an office or retail establishment, a bank, trust company, and a finance company. So the major intersection from there is countryside, I would say, Mayfield Road and Bramley. Mayfield and Bramley, just one intersection east from Dixie. We do have all major financial banks here. We have, we have many places of worships along countryside, because I do live other side of Airport Road, but sometimes whenever I do get up from Mayfield or Sandalwood, I go through it. So I notice many places of worship are already there. Health and Fitness Center in the very same major plaza on Bramley and Mayfield. There is a Life Fitness, and there are some other in the Trinity Mall, which is on Boyd and O10, basically within the same neighborhood, I would say, if not more than 2 kilometers. So the point I'm making here, over the time, after listening and reading through all in the past, I do understand about that only the car will be visible from Dixie Road. For my vehicle services, before this, another, not in relation to these 2 proposed, the one where I go is already exists here at the corner. I used to go to Mississauga on Davis, and pretty much used to go my whole day, because every morning you have to drop off your vehicle and then you go back and pick up. From Davis Road, you see the cars as well. So I don't see any difference between Dixie and Mavis. To me, it's pretty much the same. And in terms of Inspired Boulevard, I do like that when you enter all Inspired, especially on the east of Dixie, the wideness and the roundabout, which attracts, and something new lately is coming. But at the same time, if we go the north, as Mr. Doctor points out, block number 9, and right across from that side, east of Dixie on George Ray Drive, we are going to see some similar homes, as I have seen the kind of similar kind of development. So if it was fine for block number 9, I would be fine with block 10 and the Mooresville block number 11. So it's not a question, it's just my comments. I would reserve my other things unless more comments are coming or moving forward. I will be able to provide my input.
Any further questions or comments by committee members?
Through the chair, what Gagnon certainly does make persuasive arguments. And I think what I'm on the fence on is whether the first two tests, the intent of the official plan and the zoning bylaw are maintained. And these are kind of hard, technical, and I'm not sure I've heard anything that moves me over to say that, yes, excellent to event. I'm more so inclined to support staff position based on the first two tests.
Okay. I asked as a question to staff. I tend to always be in favor of looking at these conditions. In the event we get to the point of either refusal or approval, in the event approval is where we're going, are these conditions something that staff would be in favor of inserting, or is there anything else staff would want to be included or deleted from these draft conditions?
Mr. Chairman, without meaning to sound obstructive, that's certainly not my intent, sir. I can't support any of these conditions because the application does not meet the 4 tests.
Correct. Okay, understand. But again, just trying to get the headspace of staff that if we start going into that direction, I want to be or see if there's anything else that would want to be included or deleted. So that's just as a question, Ms. Corzola.
Through you, Mr. Chair, and on that vein, if you do move forward with the approval and in consideration of these conditions, I do have some small changes to the wording in as much as these conditions have been formulated such that they apply to both variances, whereas the decisions will be individual and must be specified on a site-by-site, land-by-land use basis. So I have a few very minor technical changes for your consideration.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions or comments by committee members?
I have a great deal of sympathy for the applicant and his thoughtfulness, but in terms of whether this should be rezoning, while I feel somewhat embarrassed that we approved similar applications to the north, I have to agree with staff that this application for testing out there.
Okay. Any other comments? If not, seeking a motion to proceed.
So applications, 18030 and 18031. The motion would be to refuse the application.
Okay, motion of refusal by Mr. Nurse, seconded by Mr. Crouch. All in favor? That does not carry.
Through you, Mr. Chair, to the staff, and especially to Mr. Zola, what were the suggestions you were suggesting, if you please?
Sure, and they pertain primarily to condition number 1 with respect to the addition of the 2 commercial buildings that would be a prerequisite of approval for the vehicle repair. I've simply reworded that condition as it will apply to each of the 2 applications, that a site plan, generally in accordance with the alternative conceptual site and landscape plan attached as Schedule A to this decision, including both the proposed motor vehicle sales establishment as well as an additional commercial building. The combined gross floor area of the additional commercial buildings on blocks 10 and 11, and then I've referenced also, see also the decision on A18-031, shall be a combined total of 2,000 square meters. There are some other minor amendments anytime we're referencing 2 additional buildings, because this is on a property-by-property basis. We're just looking at an additional commercial building, and likewise the corresponding references to file numbers as they cross over.
Right. More so, as you said, highlighting the fact that there are individual applications and reference these applications in reference to those conditions.
That's correct. The only other significant change would be to condition number 3, where the 2 new buildings, obviously, as well as the motor vehicle repair shop, which is how I would prefer that the auto dealership be referred to in all of the conditions, that is the defined use in the zoning bylaw, that they pertain specifically to the provisions of the required, and it's underlined, minimum parking, building setback, and building height requirements in the bylaw. I would also suggest that they should be required to adhere to the prescribed maximum, because there are maximum building setbacks specifically that would not permit the building to be pushed back beyond certain distances relative to specific lot lines. Since minimum is highlighted and emphasized, I think it would be appropriate to also include the maximum.
Understood.
Mr. Chair, would it also not be necessary to put in all the language with regard to easements between the 2 properties, particularly when the buildings are on the property line?
It certainly would. I don't see that easements are necessary here. Buildings are not over the property line. There is a requirement, in fact, for a 1.2 meter interior side yard setback. So those 2 buildings would be at least 8 feet apart, 4 feet on each side of the lot line. Any other requirement in terms of shared access and parking, each property has to individually comply with the requirements of the bylaw. So the only area I see that could be difficult is the couple of parking spaces that might be exactly right there in front, although the lot line does appear to generally fall right on the line of the parking space. So each of those spaces is wholly contained on its own property. But that would be a detail that would be finalized through the site plan approval process.
Thank you. Mr. Gagnon, I guess for clarity, and as usual, we ask that the conditions that are put forward, are they agreeable? You understand them, obviously, and are they agreeable to you as well with the amendments that Ms. Corzola has suggested?
Yes, the suggestions from the staff are appropriate, and we would support that, yes.
Okay. Are there any further, Ms. Doffler?
No, if you want to take comments, I want to put forward a proposal.
Sure.
A proposed motion. Through you, Mr. Chair, I would propose approval of both applications, including the language that was provided by Ms. Corzola, with respect to the city, simply because of the numerous applications that have been before us that were approved, both under the concerns that Mr. Nurse expressed with respect to the official plan and the zoning. If that wasn't pertinent to those applications, I feel that these 2 sites are similar and will follow suit. But what I would suggest, and I don't know how to word or add anything, but I think the city, if they're looking for character and attractiveness and streetscaping, although this may not apply with this site, both sites may not apply with what is proposed officially, certainly if we can put some wording into that regard, I think the applicant has made it abundantly clear that that's their intent. So I feel that at least if we can develop some character, it may not be of the type the city was looking for. I think what has naturally happened is this auto mall has just expanded, but if we can start to develop some character, I would prefer some language.
Yeah, and I tend to agree. The only, from my perspective, and I'll defer to staff on this, is that at site plan, any of those concerns would be something that could be raised in particular with planning, urban design, things along those lines. I would be comfortable, as we often defer to site plan for those fine details that are beyond definitely my scope of knowledge. So I understand where you're coming from. That would just be my 2 cents on that. If I'm correct, Mr. Grady, would that be something within site plan, it would be addressed regardless of if we included that verbiage or not?
Mr. Chairman, there are architectural elevation drawings that form part of site plan approval. Perhaps, for your consideration, given the community design guidelines, the committee may want to consider adding to proposed number 3, an urban design brief as well, which is a document that would be property specific to both blocks. And there are terms of reference that could be obtained to provide that urban design brief. And that will be in the context of the larger community design guidelines, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Gagnon, any comments to that?
If it helps the committee and Member Doffler and the staff, we would be agreeable in number 3 to adding a reference to an urban design brief. Absolutely. We fully expect to have to go through a fairly rigorous process anyways, yes.
Which would often be the case within...
It will be, I know that, yeah.
Okay, I mean, respecting that, so included in condition 3 is an urban design brief pertaining to both properties, Mr. Grady? Or encompassing both properties?
That would be encompassing both properties, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Does that satisfy your comments, Ms. Doffler? Okay. Any, so that being said, we've had several comments seeking a motion to proceed.
So the motion would be to approve the application based on the conditions for approval put forward to us with the amendments made by Ms. Corzola and adding the urban design brief under item number 3.
Okay. Do we have a seconder?
Yes, through you, Mr. Chair, based on the fact, as we discussed earlier, anything else on this property would not solve the things, in my opinion, especially the east of Dixie, and in the past 4 or 5 applications came in front of us. So I would like to second this motion.
Okay, all in favor? That carries 3-2. I believe we have Mr. Nurse and Mr. Crouch that are dissenting.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and all the members and staff.
That is approved, sir. I obviously do highlight the fact that there is still the appeal period, as you are aware of, and evolving from the LPAT that's now in process now. Okay?
Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Are there any other comments or questions? Seeing none, seeking a motion to adjourn. Motion to adjourn by Mr. Crouch, seconded by Mr. Chadha. All in favor? Meeting is adjourned. Thank you so much.
Thank you.